Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's British Council Youth Connect Live. My name is Romano Sorfeas, and I'm very happy to be hosting today's conversation. Thank you ever so much for joining us, whether and wherever you are in the world. Youth Connect Live is a series of online sessions for young people who aim to seek to develop the skills, the confidence, and the ideas they need to connect with themselves, but also their communities and the wider world. Today's session is actually the second session of the two connected sessions on community research. Last week, we explored the topic through an interview with our speaker, and today we will be happily take the conversation to you. Specifically, we will be taking the questions that you have shared with us from the last week and discuss some comments that came through. Community research, as we have explored already, can be a powerful tool for shifting power, amplifying underrepresented voices in local communities, and driving meaningful change whenever that is needed. It can help young people better understand the challenges around them, but also more importantly, gather evidence, and with that evidence, take the necessary action. While we getting started, the British Council team will share some practical information in the group chat. Um, Please feel free to write where are you joining us from today. That you can do specifically in the Q&A section that you can find in the lower bar of your screen by pressing to the More section with the three dots. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to reintroduce again our speaker. We are joined by Miriam King, co-founder and director of Living Proof, which is a creative studio that is based in London. In London, Miriam brings valuable research and experience in community research, storytelling, and supporting people to use research as a way to amplify their voices. And before we begin, I would like to express again my sincere gratitude to you, Miriam, for accepting our invitation and for discussing with us and sharing your insights and your invaluable, of course, experience into that field. Thank you, Miriam, and
Of
welcome.
course. Thanks for having me again, Roman. It's so nice to, pick up the conversation after last week. And I guess thanks for everyone as well who, has shared questions and interest in this topic as well. So exciting to be
Absolutely.
back.
Absolutely. The first question, actually, we have received since our chat last week.
Mm,
The audience is quite still curious about how do we define community in relation to community
mhm.
research? What do we specifically mean community when
Yeah.
they use the term?
It's such a good question and something I'm kind of always talking about. It's such a good, I guess, starting point for even this whole conversation. I think what I would say is community can mean very different things to different people. And I guess when we link it with research, like if we think about research as like we want to find out answers to questions that we're curious about, I think the community part means that we're actually working with communities and in communities to find out the answers to that question. I guess, and it very much happens in community settings, I guess, community research too. And another way I kind of like to think about it is using the word like participatory research. Sometimes those two words can be interchangeable, but I think it can be helpful when you think of participatory and then like people within communities actually participating in the research process. So being involved from the very beginning to like deciding what the topics are, what the questions are going to be, right through to disseminating the research and the evidence when it's created. Um, and a question I always like to pose, particularly with young people when I'm working with them in community research, is like as a starting point, is like, what communities are you part of? And starting to like write out all the different communities that you can think of that you're part of in your life, whether that's your family, your friends, right through to like, do you do sports, for example? Are you involved in arts and culture? to the area that you live in, to maybe the school that you attend, the country you're from. Like it can get so specific and so niche, but then communities can be much bigger kind of organisms too. So I think that's why I love community research, because you can do that research in any of those different pockets, or the people that you have something in common with, and that you maybe have a common goal or a common question that you want to explore together. So I hope that helps. But I think the word community, I guess it just means different things for different people. But that as a starting point is, yeah, I guess where it all comes from.
So we're talking a very broad range of different
Hmm.
groups that we may necessarily identify strongly or maybe less strongly, but still be
Exactly.
part of,
Hmm.
essentially. I think that also partially resolves the following question that we also received, that is specifically, what is community research used for? And
Yeah,
as you've said, it can be actually whatever community you are going through or like going to research, you can apply different uses to that
exactly. I think
type of
that's what makes
methodology.
it like really exciting and quite a powerful tool, is that you can kind of use it in everything, which is great. I think when it's really, really powerful is when you think about centering like the lived experiences of the people in the community that you're working with or that you're a part of, and then being able to amplify those voices. Because I remember last week we were talking a lot about, traditional research versus community research, and, a researcher that's coming into a community that they're not part of. I really believe they're never truly going to get the same depth and insight that they're going to get from working directly with people who are part of that community. So I really feel like that's where the real strength of it is. And then being able to use that research to do things like maybe inform policy, or, help shape services that communities are part of. It can be really powerful. And I also think about a lot about like using research to then be able to like co-design solutions. For example, it's like, okay, we've found all this information out. This is the evidence that we want to change something. How can we then use that to maybe co-design new solutions that may not have been thought of before, but only through working with communities that we figured out this might be the best option going forward. And ultimately, I think it's all about like being able to create social change, whether that's on a micro level in your community, or like, at a more kind of either national or global level. Like you can apply it just to so many things, which makes it such a powerful tool, I think.
It truly is, but one may ask, for example, even if, for example, let's say I identify maybe not as strongly with the specific local community that I live in, or like
Yeah.
neighboring community, which I see has much more immense problems than mine, like local community. The question that naturally comes up with me is that do I how can I explain that this is truly relevant for me, let's say.
Yeah.
So there is a huge question also how to maybe not justify but explain the relevance, whenever
Mhm.
we take such an action, let's say.
Yeah. I think I spend a lot of time doing that with certain groups of like young people, or for example, particularly maybe young people who I've started working with who maybe never heard of what research is or community research. They're often like, okay, well, what am I going to get out of it? Like, what's in it for me? And I think a key starting point is often like the skills that you can develop both for yourself, but then also maybe for the people that you're working with or the community that you want to work with. Like, there's obviously the practical research skills that you will learn, like, how to run interviews, how to collect data from your local area, how to share that, but also things like public speaking skills, facilitation skills, like analysis skills, confidence. I feel like that's a huge thing that I see grow amongst a lot of young people who do these types of projects. And I think a big thing as well, like, is the ability to like connect with other either young people or other organizations working in the same space or other communities. Like, if you all have kind of the same goal, or the research question that you want to figure out is bonding you together. Like that connection is, I think, a really powerful thing that people get out of it, and meeting like-minded people, being able to maybe build networks from there. And I think the skills that you learn can open up so many other pathways into future careers. Um, I often like will ask young people maybe what they want to do in the future, and you like so many times are able to kind of put research skills into being able to facilitate whatever they want to do in their career, like whether that's like working in creative industries, wanting to get into more like advocacy and activism, education. Like I feel like it filters into so many areas. So those tools are almost like things you can pick up at any stage, depending where you kind of end up. I hope that answers the question.
That definitely answers. And I think the main thing is that even if we are, you would should, I think, agree with me that even if we seek to accomplish something on a more personal scale, it also doesn't necessarily exclude the community benefit that it brings to the community value that it can generate as well. So therefore,
Exactly.
we should not discuss each of the individual, the personal and the collective, apart from one another, I think.
Exactly. It's often like a good starting point is like I've said, like maybe for young people, what's in it for them, but also what's in it for the community. Like what can the community get out of this by working together, and like where could the evidence lead to change. And I think when we were talking about last week about taking people on the journey with you, um, that can be a really powerful as way to make sure that people feel included as well. I think it's a big thing when you're doing research, is making sure people kind of stay informed and you're transparent about what you're doing, and then people hopefully will kind of get bought into the journey that you're going along as well, and hopefully want to help out.
Absolutely. We have discussed the practical sides. We last week, I remember, we have discussed, let's say, setting up, let's say, the taking the main steps, let's say, in conducting
Yeah.
community research. That is first by defining our central question that we are
Hmm.
conducting our research around with, and then mapping, let's say, the tools, that we can bring in, the skills,
Yeah.
you can also say, and also the actors, let's say, the actors on the field that we can engage with in preparing or whether in conducting that research.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, if where can young people find such useful resources to refer to? And maybe you can bring an example on it. Let's say, I
Yeah.
think last week we have discussed a case where some high school students were able to present the research to, was it the local council or the mayor?
Yeah, we were doing some work in schools, and they were able to kind of present their findings like at the Mayor of London's office, which is such a, I guess, amazing opportunity. And actually, from our conversation last week, I was doing some digging, and we have actually created, I have it here, which I can show, which might not come up on my screen, but oh, here we go. This
Yes.
community research workbook that we've developed with Living Proof and young people. So maybe we can actually share like a link to the digital copy for people who are interested. And it's a really good workbook because it takes you through all the steps of how to develop your own research project. And there's pages in there for like notes and like worksheets. And I think always the like fun part is deciding like what are those, like we said, you've defined your question and maybe who your audience is, and then deciding like what research methods are most useful for the project that you're working on. And in the workbook, it has all the different types that you can choose. And I love to think of them like almost like tools in a toolbox. And which tools are you going to use to carry out your project? So there's everything in there around like surveys and focus groups and interview styles, even things like, community mapping, like actually getting people to draw their area, for example, if you were maybe exploring like community safety, for example, how to use photography in your research. And then also thinking about how you can bring it to life in creative ways as well. I think sometimes we do the research, we do the synthesis, which means like analyzing it and finding the themes that you want to explore. And then it's like, okay, how do we want to show it to the world? And yes, you can write a research report. That's great and it has value. But I think young people are so amazing at being able to be creative and think of other ways to bring it to life. And I think that's another way that you can engage people and bring that on the journey with you as well. So yeah, I can definitely share that resource after. It's a really good starting point. And then depending where you are in the world, or I guess also what topic you want to explore, I think like local councillors or local governments usually have like really good information, or also even like places like local universities. They often have, research schools or research teams or libraries that you can access as well. But I think um, needing to know exactly what topic you're going to focus on and what area of the world you're in, I think will help you kind of narrow down where you can find that information as well. But this is a really good starting point, this workbook. You can definitely share
Absolutely.
that.
No, absolutely. Please do share with us
Yeah.
because I think I do have one from our last visit
Yeah.
as part of the 90 Youth Voices. But I think the audience will really appreciate having that. It has some crucial, not only tools, not only such advices, but also generally outlines the steps, let's say, how to
Yeah.
conduct such a research. And I think, let's say, the second part of the question that comes up with me is like whenever I do have the tools, for example, but maybe I don't have necessarily other fellow-minded people, or I struggle really um, to chase maybe them physically. Maybe what tools would you suggest, or would you suggest either from your experience or other people's experience they can use, let's say, in finding those people so that we can start having a pool of different skills and do exactly as you said, photography and other creative projects.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a really good starting point is depending on what you're doing your project on and what communities or what area you're working with, is kind of mapping out the people in that community um, who want to be involved and what the skills are, like almost doing like a bit of a skilled kind of analysis of the people, because that way you can lean into people's strengths and people are maybe more likely to be engaged because people get to use the skills that they already have or that they love to use. I think that's a really good starting point. And if there's gaps after you've done that, it's like, okay, well, where else can we find people that have those skills? I think linking up with other organizations, like what, for example, other youth organizations where you live, other community groups that are doing work on the ground, or that are working with people that you're keen to speak to. I think not being afraid to just send an email or visit someone if they're locally based that you can meet up with them. People are usually willing to help if they have the time to and they kind of understand what you're doing. Having information about the project readily available, whether that's even just, flyers, thinking about languages as well, I think, and accessibility. If you're doing a project in a diverse area where there's many different languages spoken, for example, how can you make sure that you don't exclude anyone? So yeah, I think starting with like the skills kind of analysis of the team, and then where do you need to find those other skills and how can you get people on board just through talking to them and making sure that they have the information to hand about your project as well.
Thank you. That was actually helpful advice, and um, I think actually you've mentioned it. Accessibility is, I think, a
Mm,
crucial point. Because again, we communicate in very many different ways. We have our own um, specific preferences when it comes to communicating ourselves. So therefore, I think, and above all, making one comfortable with the others. That
yeah,
was also crucial. One thing that I mean, in my community experience, we get quite a lot used to do it. Is just doing icebreakers. I
yeah,
think
exactly.
it can be just 5 to 10 minute exercise that actually can melt the ice within the group and start opening people to sharing their views or their needs or
Exactly.
concerns.
Even like sharing food is such a powerful kind of universal
Yeah,
human thing that
yeah,
people connect over. I found doing a lot of community work, like having a meal together, was also quite powerful, particularly, if you're maybe new to a community, or you're not as familiar, or like you said, maybe you're doing a topic that you're not as have as much expertise in. Often, reaching out to community leaders, and if you can get invited to gatherings where people like community groups are already meeting, so meeting people where they're at rather than trying to get them to come to you can be a really powerful tool, because then people are already in an environment where they're comfortable. And if they kindly invite you to come along to the space to maybe share your work or have a meal or have informal conversations, that can be really, really powerful. But also acknowledging that can take time. And it takes like time to build trust, and people need to know kind of what your, I guess, plans are in that space and what you hope to get out of it as well. And you might not always be invited, and that's okay too. But I think meeting people where they're at is also a really good way to kind of start to build those connections over time too. And hopefully then people start to open up and start to understand what you're doing as well.
absolutely. And that also goes to the question that we've received about how young people can build confidence. Um, I'm not sure actually if there are, apart from many digital tools that exist to scale up self-confidence, can be suggested, but I think by building trust within your group, you essentially
Mhm.
start um, motivating and endorsing one another to voice their opinions and be more decisive, let's say, and put more initiative, let's say, within what they are doing.
Exactly. And I would find like if I'm doing community research with groups of young people, sometimes, especially if they're a bit younger, they don't have this, much work experience, for example, particularly in schools. Some students might be like really quiet and shy initially. They may not even make eye contact. And then as you go through the process of designing the project together, of like deciding what research methods you're going to use and getting familiar with what research is, you can see the confidence build over time, and it's really amazing to see. And then, all of a sudden people might be interviewing strangers on the street for the project, or they're doing public speaking in front of decision makers, like going through the research project cycle essentially. Like each step of that, I think, builds different skills in people, and over time that builds confidence. And I think that's also what gives people motivation to keep going and to really, I guess, advocate for the work and to get more people on board. Like I think it's such an amazing way to build like lots of different skills, like even like leadership skills, teamwork, having to work together, facilitation skills, like I mentioned. Like there's, I think it opens up so many avenues of being able to try different things. Yeah, obviously I love it so much, which is why I'm like always like, yeah, it's great for skills building.
But still, I mean, it is still valid and it's still
Yeah.
true.
Hmm.
Thank you. Now I would like to connect our conversation to some real challenges that young people may face
Hmm.
within their communities. And one of them that we came up with, some of our audience members have asked, is about unemployment.
Mm.
The specific question is, how can young people use community research to address local challenges such as unemployment?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I think this is where like community research can really come into its own by applying it to like a real life issue. I think the starting point for example, if you're looking at something like unemployment, is like mapping out at the start who you need to speak to. Like, of course, you need to speak to young people both who maybe are in employment, but then also those young people who aren't employed, maybe young people who are in education or training, but then thinking wider of like, okay, well, who are the maybe local employers so we can understand what their needs and challenges are. Are there local training providers, for example, maybe local schools and universities? So, who are all of the different stakeholders, shall we say, or people involved in this topic, which is unemployment, like local, maybe youth unemployment, to make sure that you get as well rounded a view of the issue as possible. And I think then being able to highlight the barriers, so maybe shaping your research around, okay, what are the barriers to employment? Like, what is the real issue here? And I think that's where community research is really powerful because you're going to get really into the real issues of young people's everyday lives and what are their real stories. And those stories can be really powerful tools then to be able to present to decision makers and policymakers as well. And then after you've done the research and you find out what the barriers are, maybe thinking about with those stakeholders, okay, how can we, what are the recommendations, like what are the solutions, and if you can bring all those people together in a room to actually start to flesh out, okay, who is responsible for what and how can we make changes that are being recommended from all of the people that we've um, brought into this research process and asked questions to, and then trying to get some commitment out of it. Like, what is the collective action that we need to take? What are those solutions that maybe we're recommending? But who has to then follow through? Like, who's responsible for making those things happen? And I know in theory, when you map it out, it sounds very forward and easy, but like those kind of steps, I guess you can kind of apply to different issues or problems in your area that you want to explore, um, acknowledging that they take time. But I think the kind of key thing for there is like you have this problem like unemployment, like who are all of the people that are involved in this that we need to speak to? And then they might lead you down different trails as well. But yeah, making sure that you can kind of connect them as well and bring them all together in that one space. That's where I guess the most powerful conversations can happen as well.
It sort of resembles what we also do here in Cyprus in
Mm.
terms when we are resolving as the youth parliament, whether are we resolving some other issues. It still goes through, as you said, the mapping. We need to
Yeah,
map the needs precisely because we do know, we are perfectly aware as young people of our side of the story.
yeah,
However, sometimes we do maybe fail, or we do maybe not precisely understand the issues that prevent us, let's say, from coming up with a specific solution.
exactly.
And that was quite
But that's why it's so
that was
important to be able
yes,
to bring young people and decision makers together because it's not young people's fault that they don't know the reasons why, like the maybe the bigger economic reasons, but being able to speak directly to people who do know, it helps both sides understand each other's situations more. And I think that's where the change can start to happen, by getting the two sides into the room together.
absolutely. And for our final question, I would like to ask you what happens after the research has been done.
Hmm.
What specific steps could help the young people share their research findings,
Yeah.
um, and how they can connect with others and maybe continue doing that after the research has been concluded.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite parts of the research process is like after you have all the findings, it's like, okay, how are we going to share this with the world, but also in particular the people who can make change. And I think that informs maybe what shape that takes. Like, do you want to create a campaign that's going to be targeted directly at decision makers, for example? You could make different creative outputs for different audiences. Like in the past, we've made like magazines or podcasts or films. Social media campaigns can be really effective because you can potentially direct some of that directly at the people who you want to speak to. And using some of that campaigning then to try get your foot in the room to present your findings in more detail to those decision makers that you want to influence as well. I think another thing that can be really powerful is like trying to host some like youth-led events potentially, or like how can you connect with other young people that might be passionate about this topic area? And that could be in your local area, but also like thinking about the power of like online, like you could connect with young people across different countries, other sides of the world who maybe are also campaigning for this topic as well and change, and how you can learn from each other and build networks that way, and share your work together online in different formats as well. And maybe then that can even lead to you working on other projects together. So, if you're working on an education piece and then you've realized that other young people on the other side of the world are working on the same, like how can you connect together to share your learnings, but then build on it and create more like a global campaign, for example. So I think finding the other young people that are making change in other communities, but in similar fields of work, I think is really powerful as well. And I think that's where like things like social media, yes, they have their problems, but being able to connect through like trying to make change and social change, I think can be really powerful as well.
Absolutely, and I would say definitely that whenever you start campaigning, essentially it's a self-continuing process.
Yeah, exactly.
There are steps that are just popping up everywhere, and you can continue and continue. And we see in many cases, actually, around the world, how different leaders, community leaders, advocating for causes that go through decades, actually. So
Exactly.
therefore, I think it is something, if you're truly passionate about, and if you're truly willing, not just as someone to as maybe directly affected, but also someone just being feeling solidarity with the people affected,
Exactly.
dedicating your time with. It's something that continues. I know you also not just only gather and continue on with the project, but you also grow yourself,
100%.
essentially.
And it's motivation to keep going when you're finding that
Absolutely,
other people are doing
absolutely,
the same. Like this work
absolutely,
can be hard, but and isolating in some ways, and then you see, oh, other people are trying to fight for change too. And that's often what keeps you going and reminds you of why you do this work in the first place. So,
absolutely. Thank you so much, Miriam,
thank
for
you,
sharing
Roman.
your insights, for sharing the insights with us today. And thank you to everyone who joined us for this Youth Connect live session. We really appreciate your time, your attention, and your interest in this topic. And before we close, please look out for the feedback form in the chat. We would be very grateful if you could complete it. The feedback form will be also shared after the session, along with the recording of today's session. Please also look out for the next Youth Connect live sessions, which will take place in July, and we will continue with the theme of leadership. Thank you once again, everyone, and we hope to see you at a future session.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks, Roman. Lovely
Thank
to
you, Miriam.
chat. Bye.
Goodbye.